Jeff and I decided to speak about doubt tonight. It's one of the classical hindrances in our practice. The Buddha said there were 5 of them. And it's an obstacle that shows up in every human life, in every practice. It's not special for me or you. Just doubt. And he talked a lot about doubt and how to see it and how to work with it. So we thought it would be helpful to offer some thoughts about that tonight. I find that I have a doubt about the quality of the microphone, which is the first kind of doubt. He speaks of inquisitive doubt. I'll talk about that in a minute. So let me check that out. How is it? Is that okay? Okay, good. Good. So our practice in the Buddha's teachings, he offers in many different ways. He says, these teachings will deliver an unshakable deliverance of mind. In Yogi Berra's terms, it will be a mind that can stay clear and focused and relaxed and present and in the zone no matter what sort of baseball game it is. No matter what the weather is or whether we're winning or losing or the fans are happy or the fans are not happy or no matter what. An unshakable deliverance of mind is what he offers us. A mind that's not overcome with greed, not overcome with aversion, not overcome with confusion or delusion, ignorance. A mind not overwhelmed by overwhelm. A mind not overwhelmed by sloth or torpor or anxiety or all of the zillions of things that we can, as human beings, so easily get overwhelmed by. An unshakable deliverance of mind. Marcia Lenihan, a psychotherapist, talks about this practice as one that allows us to learn how to set up a tent in a hurricane. I'm not sure that's a great analogy, is it? But in a way it is, It's like no matter what the weather is, internally, externally. It's like, what an offer. What an offer. And furthermore, he promises, he says, you can do this. You can do this. He says, abandon what is unskillful. One can abandon the unskillful. If it were not possible, I would not ask you to do so. If this abandoning of the unskillful would bring harm and suffering, I would not ask you to abandon it. I wouldn't ask you to do it if you couldn't. You can do this. He says, cultivate that which is skillful. One can cultivate the skillful. If it were not possible, I would not ask you to do it. You can do this, he says. It sounds good, doesn't it? We wouldn't really be here if we didn't have a part of ourselves anyway who believed what he said. An unshakable deliverance of mind. And most of us come to this practice with, first of all, a touching into suffering. We talked about this, both Jeff and I have talked about it, with touching into suffering. And with a bit of faith that this sounds right, or there was something that touched us about the teachings, that it sounds it sounds right, or it touches my heart, or it rings true somehow. Yeah. Or we have an experience that really kind of gives us a little bit of faith that maybe this is really true. Yeah. And for many of us, perhaps especially in the West, I think maybe it might be especially true in the West, our next step on the path is really trying to understand things conceptually. You know, we read books, and we're so blessed to have so many amazing books, or we listen to Dharma talks, or you listen to a Dharma talk right now, you know. You say, you know, I really want to try to understand things. And it is right and good that we do that. That we really think. We think a lot. We try to inquire. And the Buddha actually encouraged this kind of practice. And he called it inquisitive doubt. It's like my doubt about the microphone. You know. And he said, really do that. Keep inquiring. Keep asking questions. You know, the famous statement that he made. He said, "Don't do this just because I say so." It's true. You know, I know it is because I've become enlightened and I see it. But don't believe me because I say so. Let my words be a guide to you, but then take those words and inquire. Use inquisitive doubt. Check it out in your own experience and see what's, you know, really see what's true. Ask. Find out. A limitation of this, perhaps, and maybe perhaps especially in our Western culture, is that we can place the highest value on this kind of inquiry. Rodney Smith speaks of this in his book. I forgot the title. It's a book on no self. He said, "We think someone who is clear, or who has thought a lot and has a lot of knowledge, is best. But our conceptual minds, our opinions about things, can obscure the ability to see the truth in innocence." I love that. You know, see the truth in innocence. We can see what someone has told us, or even what we think, for that matter, but it actually obstructs our ability to see clearly. You know, it's like that, if we get so preoccupied with that snowball sitting on the glacier, that we don't look at any of the other information that's available. And it actually can obstruct our ability. So inquisitive doubt is awesome, it's wonderful. But if that's the only thing that we rely on, the Buddha says we get in trouble. Without innocence, inquiry doesn't really work. I was reading an interview with a man named Alexei Filipenko. He's an American astrophysicist, and I love to read this stuff. And a professor of astronomy at the University of California at Berkeley. And he was part of a team that won the Nobel Prize in 2011 for his studies of physics and dark matter. And there was this interview with him, which was really amazing. It was so amusing. The interview is 1,400 words long. I didn't count them. My computer did. And I want to just give you a little flavor, of how this interview with him goes. Now, understand, this is a man who knows more than anyone else in the whole world about dark matter, whatever that is, and physics. He won a Nobel Prize for his work on this. So the interviewer says, "What is then the origin of the law of physics?" And Alexei says, "That's a great question. What is the origin of the law of physics? I don't know." So the interviewer tries again. He says, okay, let's start from the very beginning. He said, what gave rise to the universe? Why was there a Big Bang? Alexei says, so, what gave rise to the universe is an interesting question. We don't exactly know the answer to that. So the interviewer tries again. He says, scientists have just announced the discovery of the Higgs boson, whatever that is. Now understand that Alexei is one of the world's experts on the Higgs boson. He won a Nobel Prize for his study of whatever the Higgs boson is. I have no idea. He says, what do you think? What does it tell us about the origin of the universe? There's a little bit longer response, and I'm not going to read the whole thing, but he basically says, we don't know that either. He says, so we don't understand the dark energy. And he goes on to say, he says, scientists are only well aware of 4% of the universe. Only well aware. He's not saying we understand 4% of the universe. He says we're aware of 4% of the universe. That is, we understand pretty well the nature of 4% of the universe. Well, he says we understand it. The stuff that is made of atoms. 96% of the universe is made out of dark matter and dark energy. And although we know they are present, we don't know what their detailed properties are or why they are there or what exactly is going on. The title of it, I don't think I wrote it down, but the title of the interview was, we only understand 4%. So it just points to both the limits of our conceptual mind and the beauty of this man's mind, who has this quality of inquisitive doubt. He's fine with not knowing. And he studies it. He looks. He basically practices meditation around the Higgs boson, because he's continually inquiring, how does this thing work? He says, I don't really know. And that's what makes him, such an amazing scientist. So the conceptual mind has its limits. This man's a scientist. He's curious. He inquires. He frames his questions carefully and looks to see, how does this work? So it's important to inquire and important to frame our question well, and important to not get bogged down into certain kinds of thinking that can be obstacles. You can imagine what it might be like if Alexei went home every night and pummeled himself because he didn't understand how the universe works. I doubt that he would have won a Nobel Prize. He plays with it. He inquires. That's one kind. So one kind of doubt is inquisitive doubt, the doubt that allows us to inquire and be curious and ask questions. That's relaxed with confusion and not knowing. Inquisitive doubt. Another kind of doubt is what Thanissaro calls nihilistic doubt. This is Thanissaro. He says there's nihilistic doubt, which is not really doubt at all. It's just a different kind of belief. The belief that the practice won't work or that you aren't up to the practice. So recognize that. It's not really doubt. It's a kind of belief that gets in the way. And look to see what happens, what's actually going on right now. So nihilistic doubt, a belief that it won't work. I was at dinner not too long ago, and my husband and a friend were having a conversation about craniosacral work. Body work, that kind of body work. And they were discussing, as I was sitting there listening to them, how silly it was and what a waste of time and money it was. And they were kind of going on about it. you know? And I said it after a bit, being heroic in my silence, I said, could we just pause for a minute and could I just ask, could one of you give me just like a 2-sentence summary of what craniosacral therapy is? Silence. You know, that's nihilistic doubt. You know, I just don't believe it. I don't want to believe it. I don't want to know. It's an idea I have. I have a relative who says about, all the research on the evening news, tonight coffee's good, tomorrow night it's not good, tofu's good, no it's not, all the research that comes out. Every time one of those things come on the news, the relative reports to me, see, you can't trust science. Therefore, I can eat whatever I want. And it's okay. And in one sense, it certainly is. Fine. But it actually isn't true that you can eat jelly beans all day long, every day, and have your health, work right, So there's nihilistic doubt. There's just not believing something because I don't want to. I don't want to engage with it. I don't want to investigate. I'm a little afraid of it. I don't want to imagine what it might mean for me. Jeannie's question last night, I asked Ajahn Tanasanti that very question one time. The question about, well, if this is such a great practice, how come, there are only like 3 people who are enlightened?
I didn't ask it like that. I just wanted to know when the graduation.
I did. I did. This is what she said. She said, I think about a magnificent mountain where from the top you have a very clear vision of what is around and below, deep sense of peace and joy and no trace of suffering. So at the top of this mountain, Further, the way to the top has a path and it is clearly marked. Is it the fault of the mountain or the path if not many people go to the top? If some get sidetracked, if some lose interest or have second thoughts and doubt that it is all that different from anything else they've known and not really worth the effort. So similar to, the effort to kind of know what kind of food is good for me or, to explore maybe a dimension of life that's a little scary. This nihilistic doubt that keeps us caught in beliefs and really kind of suffering. Because now not only do we suffer the consequences of those beliefs, but we have to kind of keep reinforcing ourselves. Keep reinforcing anytime there's anything that might challenge that belief. We have to fight it. So we have to kind of constantly be on guard. Batting away those ping pong balls or whatever. Is that a problem? Can you hear okay over me? A little inquisitive doubt here? Okay. This is Joseph Goldstein. He says, when this kind of doubt is strong, instead of making the experiment, whether in meditation or anything else, and engaging fully in the experience so that we can see for ourselves whether it's beneficial or not, the mind simply gets lost in endless speculation, or alternately in endless resistance. So these are those places, where, thank you. One of the things that we can do with this kind of doubt is just get kind of, also get lost in rumination, not really kind of settling into the inquiry. The Buddha very explicitly notes that our practice, which he reminds us over and over again, is a very practical science of understanding suffering and its causes and the possibility of its end and the path leading to its end. So he continually reminds us. He says, one time he picks up a little bunch of leaves and he says, what's more, the bunch of leaves in my hand or all in the forest? You take, what's more, the bunch of water in my little glass or all the water in the world, around us. And of course the monks say, well, of course, all the leaves in the forest. And he says, that's how much I understand about how life works. But what I teach are these leaves. What is suffering? What is its cause? And what is its end? So he says, look and see, make the experiment. So it asks more of us than thinking, more than simply passively reading or listening, more than simple conceptual understanding. I loved Jeff's talk last night because it's so captured just that, that it was just, just talking so clearly and simply and directly. This is suffering. These are the consequences of suffering. It's possible to shift gears. Here's how. Just so simple. But he wasn't talking conceptually. He was just talking, from his heart and from practice and path, and it was just perfect. So the problem is learning how to bring wholesome doubt, inquisitive doubt, experimenting to our practice, and to release. The Buddha says, abandon what is unskillful, cultivate that which is skillful, to abandon the kind of doubt that's not so skillful. The kind of doubt that causes us to ruminate, to struggle, to suffer, to go on and continually suffering. The Buddha had an image for this kind of doubt. He says, imagine a bowl of water ruffled by the wind so that the water trembled, eddied, and rippled. If a man with good eyesight were to look at the reflection of his own face in it, he would not know or see it as it really was. Again, Brahman, when a man dwells with his heart possessed and overwhelmed by doubt and wavering, he cannot know or see. So he says doubt does that to the surface of our experience, and we can't see any longer. We can't see clearly what's true, what's suffering, what's the end of suffering. So the kinds of doubts that get in our way. One of them is, I just call it psychological doubt. I don't think it's a Buddhist term. It's a kind of doubt that ruffles the waters. Doubts that arise out of our psychological conditioning. The voice that tells us, we know these voices, you personally are not worthy. You are not capable. This is not good enough. Furthermore, it will never be good enough. You will never be good enough. You haven't made it yet. You are not likely to. Your family background, your particular psychology, your particular personality, your particular life circumstance means that you are wounded in a particular way and the practice won't work for you. You cannot get free. These kinds of struggles, challenges in our lives come up, and the mind turns against itself and tells us things like that. We hear it, don't we, when we sit? Well, that was a waste of time. Joseph talks about, Joseph Goldstein talks about, he says, he got up from one sit and he was just shaking his head. He said, the mind has no shame. I just sit here for this whole path, and here I am, this experienced practitioner, this teacher, and my mind is running amok. He says, the mind has no shame. But that's a whole different thing. It's a discernment and a bit of a smile, And he's not falling into this kind of psychological doubt. I can't do it. It's like this right now with me and my shameful mind. Doubt tells us you are stupid, inadequate, foolish. If only you were different. If you were less of this or more of that. You were less anxious, less agitated, less distracted. It would be better. After all this time, after all this reading, all this teaching, you should be better. We doubt our capacity in other ways. It's too hard. It's not the right time. My experience, whether it's pleasant, unpleasant, even our pleasant experience. You ever had that experience? Even here, my pleasant experience, it should be different. It should be more. It should be less. It should be, it should be something. That's doubt. Comes in. Whatever it is, it should be different than how it is. I can't do it because, fill in the blank. I shouldn't have come to this retreat because, I should have gone home with those people on the weekend. I told somebody today, some of you have heard me say this before, I remember walking, I was at a Tara Brach retreat one time, and I was about this time in the retreat, and I was walking across the lawn, and the thought flitted across my brain, maybe somebody will die, and I'll have to leave. Somebody asked me if I had anyone in particular in mind. Maybe I can get out of this somehow. Shinzen Young is like Mr. Macho Meditator. I don't know if you've ever sat with him. He is just like, I don't even have a good analogy, but he is like major macho meditator. And he talks about leaving the first, half dozen retreats he went to. Couldn't navigate them. This was too hard. And he kept coming back. The thing is, all of us are inadequate, These little human bodies, these little human minds, all of us have failed. Big time. Sometimes I just marvel. You read things in the newspaper about, people getting in trouble this way or that way. And don't you ever look back at your life and you think, there, but for the grace of God, some of the stupid things I did, some of the mistakes I made, it's like why I am not in a maximum security prison. I just do not know, just how does this work? I have some good karma someplace, All of us have made those kinds of mistakes, big ones. Get over it. Relationships, businesses, finances, jobs, both sides of racism, both sides of sexism, classism. We've lost it all in uncontrolled emotion. We look at people who are, out of control emotionally. Have you ever done that? Unskillful speech, unskillful actions. We've all been there. I continue to go there with some regularity. My husband actually tells me, some of you have heard this before, I've been married for a very long time. I've been married for 43 years. And he tells me that when he first knew me, and indeed when he married me, God knows why, that I was the most angry person he had ever met. Isn't that cool? You know? He had never met anybody who was so angry. We've all been there. You know? Get over it. Because if that's the criterion, you know, that somehow we don't have those kinds of human foibles, we don't have those kinds of failures, we'll never get past the first step up that mountain. We'll just give up. Because if that's the criterion, none of us is good enough. That wasn't part of the test for the Buddha. Quite the opposite. The Buddha taught anybody. And some of the people stories about some of the people who became enlightened, mass murderers who became enlightened. You know, Osama bin Laden, really, Osama bin Laden types, who heard the teachings and practiced and became enlightened and went on to be great teachers. So the kind of doubt, the psychological doubt that drives us but doesn't nourish, pushes us but doesn't support, that causes us to measure ourselves against goals that are made up in our minds, or maybe somebody else's mind, that thinks in terms of absolutes, shoulds, never, always, beats us up for mistakes, sees without love or grace or forgiveness. Can we accept that we're not good enough? That, in the Buddha's words, we're uninstructed worldlings? Just how it is, guys. Without making that an identity or a reason to collapse, a reason to give up. The Buddha invites us not to use these awarenesses in this way. We can see our mistakes. He's inviting discernment. Are we willing to simply see these challenging aspects of human life? Indeed, to allow the experience of them in our bones, the way a child might explore, oops, I fell down. You're not asking us to be good narcissists, to say everything I do is just hunky-dory and perfect. Oops, screwed that one up. Now, what can I learn from it? How can I develop? How can I find freedom from suffering, even here? So how can we work with the inevitability of doubt, releasing it as a hindrance and allowing a wholesome doubt to nourish and support our practice? We begin with the wholesome curiosity that Hugh spoke of. You know, he talked about that in his talk the other night. What is this? How does this work? Or that the astrophysicist was talking about. How does this work? What is suffering? What is the cause of suffering? What's keeping me blocked? What's leading to suffering? What's leading to freedom? The first is just simple discernment. See it. See doubt. Know it when it arises. The Buddha invites us to simply just know this is doubt. When the Buddha was sitting under the Bodhi tree and Mara was tempting him, he would say, this is doubt. This is doubt. I don't have to go there. This is doubt. We don't have to believe it. We don't have to act upon it. It can be just simply known. It sounds easy, but it can be rather challenging. It requires a deep and humble recognition and acceptance of this human life. I'm fallible, I'm human, I'm subject to sickness, aging, and death. We really get it in our bones. I'm going to die. I get caught in my wants, my fears, my unconsciousness, My emotional needs will never be met fully. How about that one? I will never get it right in any final and stable way. I am not a thing, an entity. I am a field of open, empty awareness and experience. I will never get it right. So when doubt arises, we just simply see it. To note it mindfully, it's a hindrance. It's the arising of one of the hindrances. And a second way of working with it is to then inquire. First we have to notice that it's there. And to inquire into refraining, into renunciation, into releasing doubt. And this is a little tricky, because as soon as we start talking about renunciation, we could start to get into a little bit of a battle. I've got to get rid of you, that place where we start to push. But that isn't what renunciation means. If the intention in renunciation is to, quote, overcome badness, it won't work. Renunciation, Alice in Wonderland has a teaching about renunciation. You remember Alice would, she was wandering around and she'd come upon all these little bottles and jugs of things. And there was one of them that was marked poison. And she reads the label, she kind of looks over and she reads the label and she says, poison. She says, I suspect if you continue to drink daily out of a bottle marked poison, it is bound to affect you sooner or later. That's renunciation. I don't have to drink this Kool-Aid. I don't have to believe these insults. My mind is hurtling at me. That if somebody else said them, I'd really be kind of pissed off. I don't have to drink this poison. That's renunciation. Just see it and don't feed it. In Bali, some of you know, I spend a fair amount of time in Bali. And in one of the houses where we stayed one year, there was a sign. There are lots of stray dogs and cats in Bali. At least there used to be. They're better cared for now. And so there were lots of stray, especially cats, but a lot of stray animals that would come around to the compound, the housing compound where we were staying. And, there was a little sign. I'm sorry, what's happening here? Jeff, rescue me. What's happening? Do I? Stop touching it. Inquisitive doubt. Don't touch it. Okay, I'll try. There was a sign that said, please don't feed the animals. Don't feed the cats and dogs. We know you love them. And we care about them too. They're fed elsewhere, but if you continue to feed them here, after you leave, they'll keep coming around. I thought that was a lovely metaphor for our hindrances, If you feed the hindrances, they will keep coming. Just don't feed them. Don't indulge them. When you find those thoughts in your mind, don't let go. Is it my shawl? Bad microphone. Oh, there you are. Don't move. Honey, I've been practicing all day with not moving. What do you mean, don't move? So we don't take the exit. We allow the hindrance to be in the background, but we just don't hop on the train. That's renunciation. Not because we're bad or wrong, or the doubt is bad or wrong for being there. It's just that if we drink the poison, or if we feed the hindrances, it'll keep coming back. And the Buddha says, hindrances are fed by inappropriate attention. And he has lots of teachings about what to bring attention to and what not. I could actually probably talk for about 6 nights on the different things he says about how to bring appropriate attention to the hindrances when they arise. But just to know, if I drink the poison, it's bound to affect me sooner or later. The deeper reason for releasing, for renunciation, for releasing the self-criticism and judgment of self or other, lies in the deepest and most central of the Buddhist teachings. Here is where it goes beyond psychology and into our transcendental practice. Criticism and self-doubt help us to maintain the illusion of a separate self. The payoff is we get validated for existing, no matter what our sense of self-worth is, high or low. At least I'm here. I exist. When there's no resistance, fear cannot be maintained. We like the fear because I am, quote, working on my inadequacies. I am well defined. Problematic as it might be, at least it's defining me. Rodney Smith has a little sign over his desk that says, Rodney writes this book on self and no self. He has a sign over his desk that says, it's better to be wanted by the police than not to be wanted at all. So it's better, it's better to have some identity than to kind of need to practice this quality, this quality of renunciation, of release, and just being with the flow of experience. So one of the reasons we hang on to doubt is because it gives us an identity. Stephen Colbert says, who am I if not you? It's something, if I'm just not that. Another aspect of discernment is investigation. We can look and see what's the belief that underlies it. That goes back to that nihilistic doubt. What am I believing here? With some, so we can kind of investigate, just with curiosity. How, it's like a little kid who kind of picks up a toy. I gave my grandson one time a truck that you could take apart and you could put it back together again, and you could put it back together again in different ways. And we just played for hours like, how does this thing work? So the investigation of how does this work? How does this work? It's a little tricky because it can collapse us into rumination and kind of psychologizing, if you will. So we have to kind of be a little discerning about that. But it's sort of like, okay, what is feeding this? I seem to be feeding the cats and dogs. How am I doing that? How am I doing it? Why am I doing it? And we look carefully. We look to see. Another one, and I won't talk about this other than to name it, is the shamatha, the just letting go of the thoughts and abiding in the energy that's arising. We do that a bit when we really practice with the elements, when we kind of come into the body and just, okay, this is what doubt feels like in the body. When we're really present with the energy, because energy isn't a static thing, it moves. If it doesn't move, that is actually the most peculiar thing in the whole world. It is the first time in the history of the universe that has happened. So we can kind of be with the energy and look to see, how is this working? What might be needed here? many people this week, many of the talks have mentioned patience. Being with our doubts, being with our practice, working with renunciation, working with the energy, cultivating patience. We begin to see that we do indeed never get to a place where we're kind of, okay, we got it, we're settled, and that's part of the problem. Some of you have talked about that in your interviews today. Where you're actually opening to that kind of spaciousness, and it's a little weird. It's a little scary. I have this cartoon, I meant to bring it. There's a cartoon, and as a New Yorker, one of those New Yorker cartoons, and there are two executives that are standing in what is obviously a high-rise building. And the high-rise is just all glass, there's no like brick or anything. It's just one of those really elegant buildings that's all glass, and the guy's desk is here, and the two guys are standing next to the desk, and they're looking out the window, only you realize that there actually is no window. One guy has got his arm out through the space, and he's saying to the other one, he says, yeah, when I first realized that there was no glass here, I must confess it gave me a bit of a start. So there's nothing there, there's nothing, there's nothing to hold on to. And when we really begin to drop into that, doubt sounds to look, criticizing ourselves, and, it really begins to feel and look like not such a bad deal, because it's kind of scary. There's another image from Indiana Jones. I love Indiana Jones, where he's got the map, the treasure map, and he's following it carefully, and he goes through, and there, all the gazillions of rolling balls and arrows and skeletons, God knows what else, that, he manages all that. He gets through all that, and he gets out, he goes through the whole gauntlet, and he gets out to the other side, and he gets to this ledge. And this ledge is on the edge of this incredible precipice. It's like a gazillion miles down. And the map says, cross here. He says, cross here. He says, I can't cross here. There's no way to cross. And then he gets it, that his challenge is to cross here. And as a way of supporting himself, he picks up a bunch of gravel and he throws it out, and the gravel lands on what was an invisible path. But his doubt, he had to overcome his doubt. And experiment, look to see. Again, an image from mythology. Translated into our modern idiom. We all have these maps, cross here. And you come to us in interviews because and you bring us your maps and you go, am I reading this right? I think I read it wrong. And most of the time, isn't it true? And at least in my interviews with you guys, I say, no, I don't think you're reading it wrong. I think you're doing fine. It says cross here, yeah. This is what it feels like to cross here. Keep going, you're doing great. Or, well, maybe that isn't quite what it's, so that's where a teacher can help. It's like, I think it actually says cross over there, And you go, well, I don't want to cross over there. There are snakes over there, Okay, well, let's then talk about how to work with snakes, how to be with snakes. So doubt, patience. This is Punaji. He says, original Buddhism was a practical solution to the basic problem of existence, which is the anxiety that underlies our daily concerns, troubles, and tribulations. The Buddha says in the Anguttara Nikaya that it may be possible for a person to claim to have been free from physical disease even for 100 years, but it is not possible for a person to claim to have been free from mental disease even for a day. And that's from the Buddha. We train, we cultivate slowly. We are patient with it. We inquire. We're kind. I have to tell you, I had tremendous doubt putting together this talk about doubt. I sometimes get into this place of I have no idea what I am talking about. Just none. I should just, go clerk in the grocery store. And I finally realized, this is a couple weeks ago when I was working on this talk, and I finally realized that, you know what? There's an underlying factor that's happening here, and it's making me a little wonky. Poor Jeff had to deal with my wonkiness at times in the last few weeks. I had this surgery. I had a relatively benign skin cancer, but the surgery itself turned really quite complicated and ended up being a bit traumatic for me. So I realized as I was working on this talk that I was trying to kind of push myself in a way that really I just couldn't do. But what if I get to this is when I only thought I had 2 talks to give. What if I get to the retreat and and my talk isn't ready? What then? What then? What will happen then? And it was like, honey, it doesn't matter. Chill, rest, relax, get your body in shape. That I realized there was just something underneath it, a condition that was present, that was causing that agitation. I was trying to push through another condition, and it was causing that quality of agitation. Did I lose it entirely? Okay. So in the Satipatthana Sutta, the Buddha says, she knows how the arising of the non-arisen skeptical doubt comes to be. She knows how the rejection of the arisen skeptical doubt comes to be, and she knows how the non-arising in the future of the rejected skeptical doubt comes to be. Basically, what's that saying is how if it's arisen, you know how it's arisen. If it's not arisen, you know what not to do. You pay attention. You learn how it works. And you do what's needed. And it's not that you don't make mistakes. Suffering is primarily a call for attention, which itself is a movement of love. More than happiness, love wants growth, the widening and deepening of awareness and consciousness and being. Whatever prevents that becomes a cause of pain, and love does not shirk from pain. And one of the limitations of this talk is I neglected to note the source of that. So we cultivate a kind heart, how we speak to ourselves with curiosity, with generosity, with resolve to be firm and steadfast. We're going up this mountain, but not harsh. When we need to stop and, pitch our tent or get a drink or even go down and come back another day, we discern when that is. Not this has to succeed, but a willingness to fail. It's not doomed or determined to fail, but a willingness to fail. I had to be willing to fail in this talk. Can we see how things work? What helps? What doesn't? Where's suffering? Where's freedom? We have the opportunity to create an environment that is conducive to our openness, to our freedom. In each moment to sow a positive seed, to experiment, and to really be kind and patient. And another quality that can help us work with doubt, I've talked with some of you about this in interviews today, is opening to the absence of doubt. When there is goodness, when there is clarity, when we see that place where the Buddha says, when you see clearly for yourself, this is true. Don't go by what I say, but look to see. And when you see clearly for yourself, this is true. Pay attention to that. Pay attention in your mind. Pay attention in your body. This is the absence of doubt. Know it, discern it, delight in it, cherish it. Our work is hard. Climbing up the mountain is really hard. It's why there are only 16 of us here and not 16,000. For that matter, we're already a good ways up the mountain. There are 16,000 at the bottom who are, reading all the billboards about mindfulness and how groovy it is. Awesome. There's a story I told Nisargadatta. I told somebody the other day. Nisargadatta was an Indian saint, and he was this sort of kind of funky guy. But people would come, an enlightened being, and people would come from all over the world to just be in his presence, much less hear him teach. And one day somebody came in and was kind of abrasive and challenging to him and asked him one question and kind of listened to his answer and nodded and kind of went off, left. And afterwards his students said to him, what's going to happen to that man? I mean, here you are. I mean, we've come thousands of miles to sit at your feet, and he just dismisses you like you're nothing. He said, what's going to happen to him? And the Nisargadatta says, it's too late for him. He's already started on the path by just coming into the room. He said, his path will unfold. It apparently won't be through me. No worries. I don't need it to be. But he's already on it. He's already started up the mountain. And time and form and who and when and where, and it doesn't matter. I'll leave you with a couple of things. One is the very same quote that I left you with the other night, only this is the part that came before the part that I read to you, and then I'll read you a poem by David White. This is again from Stephen Levine in his book, Healing into Life and Death. He says, there is a story about an intellectual youth who felt he could learn everything from books. He read about the stars and became an astronomer. He read about history and became a historian. He read about swimming and drowned. Some things we can only learn by wading in slowly, from the direct experience of the ocean of being lapping against our body. To enter this process directly is to participate in the healing we took birth for, is to become fully alive. The secret of healing is, there is no secret. Healing is an open book. You are now on page 13. And here's a poem from David White. I'll close with this. It's called Sweet Darkness. When your eyes are tired, the world is tired also. When your vision has gone, no part of the world can find you. Time to go into the dark, where the night has eyes to recognize its own. There you can be sure you are not beyond love. The dark will be your womb tonight. The night will give you a horizon further than you can see. You must learn one thing. The world was made to be free in. Give up all the other worlds except the one to which you belong. Sometimes it takes darkness and the sweet confinement of your aloneness to learn anything or anyone that does not bring you alive is too small for you. So, let's sit for a moment.